Hey guys, I am sitting here with Cheryl Jones, host of the podcast called Movies Made Me. Cheryl, how's it going?
Great. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Can you tell me a little bit about Movies Made Me?
Yes, Movies Made Me is a show where we talk about the movies that have made you who you are. Each guest comes armed with a list of 5 movies that have influenced them.
Only 5.
Only 5, and not necessarily your favorite movies, but ones that influenced you. And we go beyond movies with 3 other things, anything under the sun that have made you who you are.
And has there been a few movies that have come up constantly?
Well, Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, is by far the leading
most
film
influential movie of all time?
Yes.
Fantastic. So how do people listen to it?
Through mmmpodcast.com or, of course, iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and Google Play Music.
Fantastic. It's the greatest mystery in literary history. A divisive question with highly contested answers. Who was the writer behind the pen name William Shakespeare? Welcome to Don't Quill the Messenger. Here's your host, Stephen Sable.
Welcome back, fellow Quillers. We're so glad to join you again with this episode of Don't Quill the Messenger. Today, my guest is Shelley Maycock. She is an English professor at Virginia Tech, where she teaches first-year English. She is also a very long-standing and prominent Oxfordian, many times behind the scenes. And one of the behind the scenes ways that she contributes to this movement that we're going to talk about today is her stewardship. I'll call it that because I think that's a really good word for it. Her stewardship of the Shakespeare by Another Name Facebook page. Shelley, welcome to Don't Quill the Messenger. So glad to have you.
Hi, Steve. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So there's a lot we could talk about with regard to your history as an Oxfordian. And many people within the movement know you and know you very well. But for my listeners, they probably don't know you as well. And I'd like to give them just a quick little overview of you as an Oxfordian before we get into the Shakespeare Facebook page and its history and its importance to the current Oxfordian movement. How long have you been an Oxfordian?
Probably since about 2012, I think.
Okay, 2012. You're coming up on your 10-year anniversary.
Yeah. How about that? Yeah. I got started because I was researching a lot of early modern things because I was going to write a novel. I'm a creative writer as well as a literature student. And I just ran into, I had always studied Shakespeare, and I was studying about the time Shakespeare came on the scene in the 1580s, and I was doing research on that. And I think I ran into Mark Anderson's book completely by accident. And
that's Shakespeare by Another Name.
And I also ran into the authorship pages on Facebook at the same time.
Uh-huh.
So I got involved very quickly and read a lot. And I had, in graduate school, one of my professors had suggested to me that the authorship question was an open question, and that perhaps someone like Marlowe was also the author. And that theory never really sunk in, never really stuck with me. So when I discovered the Oxford story, I was just blown away. So
I agree that, that's interesting because that's exactly the same journey that I took. I was first introduced to the Shakespeare authorship question by someone who was Marlovian in their thinking. And that gentleman introduced me to the whole idea of that some other author. And through my own search and my own journey, and I get emails from listeners a lot about this topic. Like, how did you come to believe what you believe? And that's a whole nother episode than what we're going to talk about today. But I think that Mark's book, Shakespeare by Another Name, has been transformative for a lot of people. And that's one of the milestones in my journey, was reading his book.
Yeah, and he was actually present on the Facebook page on Shakespeare when I started. So it was really interesting to be able to actually talk to him and read his takes on things. And he was doing a book on tape version of his book and stuff like that. So it was great to be able to ask him questions, and
sure,
the other scholars were on the page a lot. We also had another page called Stratford Grammar, which was kind of a not very serious take on everything. And that was kind of like the late night fool around page.
So was that was that the humor
around
page? Like the comedy and tragedy? There's the comedy page and the tragedy page?
Yeah, well, it was kind of the comedy page and the serious discussion page.
Does that page still exist, or no, it's gone?
It's not very active. It's
okay.
main moderator has kind of lessened his role, I think.
But the Shakespeare page has pretty good, significant number of followers and a lot of relevant traffic on a regular basis. Like there's, in the world of social media, content is king. And one of the things that I love about that page is how much user-generated content it continues to see on a regular basis. And I think that's one of the reasons why people who find the page become followers of the page and pay attention to it, because there is this constant stream of relevant content happening and discussion occurring. And I think that's a wonderful asset.
Yeah, our members post a lot of very interesting kind of instantly as they come on the media. A lot of interesting posts, and there's a lot of knowledgeable people who have been Oxfordians for a long time on the page. It ranges from somewhere between 1,300 to 1,400 members, and maybe growing. And most people are allowed to post things, but they're not really allowed to advertise things too often.
Sure.
So that there's not a lot
and you're a moderator.
So there's not a lot of repetition.
Are you the principal moderator of that page now?
Yes. We have 3 moderators.
How did that
happen? I've been friends with Mark Anderson for a long time, and I volunteered to be a moderator while he was still doing moderation. And one of our moderators, Anne, unfortunately passed away, and I kind of started helping. And Mark is an investigative journalist, so at some point he had to take a hiatus, and it has become an extended hiatus because he's gotten other jobs. And I was able to keep going. So, and I was handling things on a pretty regular basis. So he basically wanted me to take it over, and it still belongs to him in a way because it's based on his book. I try to keep the emphasis on the theory of Oxfordianism that is established by his book to a certain extent, just to keep things on an even keel. And it's very evidence-based, so that's a good thing. And I have had to adjust things to cover certain conflicts and things that have come up.
Oh, I was about to ask you about that. So,
yeah.
as the moderator of any kind of a site, whether it's a social media site like the Shakespeare Facebook page, or it's a website that has a blog or comment sections, YouTube where there's everything has to be moderated by somebody, and there have to be rules and there have to be guidelines to follow, and they need to be clearly stated, and people need to know what they are, and they need to abide by them.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. My day job, I work for a government that has social media sites and that has websites. And one of my jobs is to moderate those sites. And we have very clear, very specific posted rules about using those pages. Now, obviously, those rules are going to be very different than the rules of your site, but nonetheless, the site has to have rules. Tell us a little bit about the rules of the site and how they came to be.
Well, it is a private site, and so we feel that we can kind of not be too careful about what we do. But
sure.
But we don't have to worry about censorship, getting in trouble for censorship or anything. But we do want it to be an open forum and a big tent forum. Anybody who is willing to not be combative and engage in serious discussion or lighthearted discussion is welcome. And we generally ask that people explain when they enter where they've heard about the Oxfordian theory or what their orientation is, just so that we know. And if they don't answer the question, we don't let them in. And they would have to try again and answer the question. But
and what is the basic question? So so listeners who are listening right now who want to go to the site and would like to become a follower, what can they expect? What's the number one question?
The number one question is, how did you hear about the Oxfordian theory of Shakespeare authorship? What do you know? What basically, what do you know about it? It's just, kind of a basic question. That's not exactly word
once
for
this
word,
episode posts, I hope you get a flood of people who answer that question by saying, I first heard about it through Don't Quill the Messenger.
That's
awesome.
great. Yeah. As long as we kind of know that they, have a legitimate connection to the question, sort of.
Sure.
Because we did have to make the page go private because we had problems with some trolls from a group that exists to troll us called Oxfrod. And some of them are still members, but we did have to make it go private. They actually have a few moles in our group that kind of screenshot us and make fun of us on their site. But
wow, that sounds all conspiratorial. Like you got secret agents from the other side who are moles inside your Facebook page organization.
They're under sock puppet names, and we don't know who they are necessarily.
Nice. All right, you hear that, Quillers? So, fellow Quillers, you need to go on the page, ask to become a follower, and then watch for the moles.
Yeah, if you join the other group, you can see stuff coming from our page over there. Even though it's against the rules.
It's so incredible. That blows me away. And that was one of the reasons why I asked you about why there are rules. And because there are people out there who are that infantile that they want to just troll your site. They want to make, disparaging comments or ad hominem attacks or whatever it happens to be. And so you have to monitor that, or it just becomes noise and nobody will glean what they should be gleaning. And one of the things that I think about the page that is so awesome is, like I said before, the amount of content that is flowing through there. And the people far and wide who will just post something interesting or something they read or something they've learned or something they found and share it with others. And then a discussion will occur, very much like the discussions that happen on this podcast fortnightly.
There are often some threads run to 700 comments or more.
Oh my word.
Sometimes they get totally long, and we have to kind of maybe start a new one because you can't find the bottom of the thread.
Yeah, right.
Being that it's Shakespeare. And we also just have a basic rule to be civil and not to do personal attacks. If you want to attack someone's idea, that's different than attacking them personally. If you want to attack the way they got their idea, that's not personal either. But they should not be doing ad hominems, and should basically, if you supply information, you should say where you got it, cite it if possible. Just be transparent about what you're talking about. It's a good policy.
What would you say are some of the more prominent topics that have been trending across the page recently?
Well, recently it has come to our attention that there is a person named Dennis McCarthy who has done research on the role of Thomas North and a few of his family members in the role. Yeah. There is some influence of Thomas North upon the works of Shakespeare, and we're very interested to find out any source or influence on Shakespeare on Oxford, and or if there was collaboration, or if there was a lot of influence from someone, or he just used someone as a major source and stuff like that. So,
sure.
But there have been extensive discussions of the North theory recently, and we also talk a lot about Shakespeare, or William from Stratford, and various elements of the case for his authorship, and what our arguments against that are, and because there is a particular lack of evidence for his authorship during his lifetime, especially.
It's always great when I go scrolling through my Facebook feed and posts from that site pop up in my feed. It's always great that there is this eclectic mix of options that pop up. Somebody will have posted a link to an article they read, or somebody will have posted a link to a piece of art that they discovered that they think is interesting, that is a portrait of somebody, or maybe is a portrait of somebody else. Sometimes it will be just a really clever meme that somebody will throw up there, or a quote of either from the works or from someone else about the works. It's a really interesting flow of content that I think serves the double purpose of continuing to serve as a forum for all of us who are members there to share ideas, clever quips, little jokes, little jabs, even sometimes. But I think more importantly, it's a great place for newcomers to the Shakespeare authorship question to see that sort of open discussion happening in real time. Yeah. And being able to have the option to participate if they want to, or to just observe and learn by watching.
Yeah, I learned a lot on the Facebook pages, because you generally have quite a few of the most knowledgeable people in the question on our site. So, like Roger Strittmatter, my husband, and Richard Mallam from England, who's in the DVS. Alexander Waugh, who's in DVS, is the De Society in the UK.
Rick Wagaman is a regular, and the new Oxfordian of the Year,
right?
Who is regularly commenting or posting interesting information up there.
Yeah,
I see him there quite often, I think.
Yeah, and his wife as well, who is a French medievalist and has a lot of
who has also been a guest of this program.
Right? Yeah, Elizabeth.
Well, she's awesome.
Yeah, so you can talk to the people the experts. If you have a question, several people will give their take on it.
And there are a certain number of prominent Oxfordians who are really good at using social media and who are involved in it. And then you see them, of course, more often in the comments. Another one is one of our board members, Julie Sandys Bianchi, who is specifically connected to the founding of this podcast series, by the way. She is also somebody who pops up on the Shakespeare site.
Yeah, she's my co-moderator. She doesn't.
Oh, I didn't know that. Really? Okay.
She doesn't spend as much time on the page because she has some vision issues, so it's hard for her to do that sometimes. But you do have a little help then.
Yeah, you're not running the whole thing all on your own.
She's there too, and the original founder of the page, Jim Choma, who's not really very active on the page, is still a moderator as well. And he started it with Mark's cooperation back in about 2011, I think. So.
Okay, so now I have to ask you then, when, if ever, have there been moments that you have had no choice but to exercise enforcement of the rules by either deleting comments or suggesting to someone that they shouldn't be a member of the forum anymore? Has that ever happened?
Well, we actually keep a spreadsheet on how many times people have been warned if they have called other people names or used hearsay about someone or done other personal attacks or just refused to cooperate and be civil. And basically we have a 3 strikes and you're out rule. But there are also new tools in Facebook groups now. You can mute people. You can stop commenting you can stop a thread for a while just to let everybody cool off and think let their better angels prevail, perhaps. And
I love how you put that. Yeah, let their better angels prevail. Just stop being a keyboard warrior for a moment.
Yeah, sometimes I'm going to be extremely busy and something is going on that I don't want to progress in the way it is going on at the moment, and I'll stop things temporarily just so I can go somewhere and not have to worry about what's happening while sleep. So
that makes total sense. Like if you shut off comments on something so that you don't have to monitor it for the next several days, and make sure that somebody isn't doing something to profane someone else or whatever the extremes can be.
It's usually like 12 hours or so, or some people I have muted for a month just to give me a vacation from them in some cases, or to give everyone else on the page a vacation from them.
Okay, so there is such a thing as Oxfordian Facebook jail. Is that
Yeah.
what you're telling me?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
Well, hey,
there's
you hear that?
Shakespeare jail, the Shakespeare Tower.
There is the Shakespeare Tower. So don't end up, listen, folks, if you're listening and you go to the site and you ask to be a follower, play by the rules. You don't want to end up in the Shakespeare Tower of social media punishment.
I don't want
That's awesome.
I don't want people to think that this is a frequent occurrence. It's basically when
and that's why I asked, like, how often, like, if ever.
Occasionally,
so it does happen, but not very often.
Someone will have had a little too much happy hour or something and just not be in their best form. And sometimes we have to put the brakes on that.
Okay. So. Well, and people, one of the things that has been a recurring theme of several episodes that I've done now with different guests is how people cleave to their passions about this topic, and arguments can get heated.
Yeah.
Whether and not just Stratfordians versus Oxfordians, or Stratfordians versus anyone who has any other question about the authorship, but sometimes even among doubters and skeptics there can be tremendous passions, and especially among Oxfordians there can be tremendous passions. And there's Jim Warren just put out recently his giant volume of the history of Oxfordianism, and I say giant volume because it's a magnanimous work, and it's going to be something valuable to all of us from now till the end of time, including people 20 years from now who come to this movement and want to know about it and can use that book to understand the history of it.
Yeah,
but there are two real specific chapters in there where he talks about how feuding within the Oxfordian movement also became a part of the history of the movement.
Yeah, there's a great deal of problems sometimes with kind of anxiety of influence. And even jealousy of people who get for attention sometimes. And that can be a little bit of a problem. And there are issues that cannot really necessarily be resolved with evidence because there is so little evidence about certain things. So it gets kind of tenacious. I will every once in a while do a poll to see how many people stand on one side of a certain issue, like Prince Tudor, or whether they think Shakespeare was literate or illiterate, or various issues like that, just to see how many people stand on each side. So that's gonna.
Do you keep track of that data? Do you have that data somewhere?
It's on the page. I did a poll on. I think I did a poll on Prince Tudor about 6 months ago, and I got busy and didn't keep track of the data. But it's on the page somewhere, so I could find it if I needed to. But I think I'm going to start. I think I'm going to start keeping track of those things a little better. I think
I'm a
volunteer.
very important.
I'm a volunteer, and I also teach a full schedule of first year writing at the big state university, Virginia Tech. So I do this in my spare time.
Right. No, I appreciate that, and that's important to note. I think as well is that is true about you and a lot of others who are involved in the movement. Is they're there because of their passion, and I think that speaks to why sometimes things can get a little heated between people as well. Is that it's a labor of love, it's a passionate issue. Everyone has their different journey, everyone has their different belief system with regards, but I can tell you I ask every episode, and I'll use that moment right now to say, contact me. I want listeners to tell me what they want to hear about, what they're interested in, how they came to the podcast, how they came to the question, what issues are unresolved or would they like to see explored or answered better. And they can reach out to me by writing to contact@don'tquillthepodcast.com. don'tquillthepodcast.com. contact@don'tquillthepodcast.com. So they write to me, and one of the things that they write to me most about is that issue. They want to know the Prince Tudor solution. It doesn't matter what side they're on. It doesn't matter if they agree with it or disagree with it. They want to know more about it because they want it to be resolved some way, somehow. That's what I hear a lot.
Yeah, it's very complex. And I think it's a lot of scholars are sort of agnostic about it. Agnostic in the sense of we may never really know the truth about this. But it does, there are dynastic conflicts, concerns about heirs in the plays and the poems that just scream at you sometimes. You're like,
yeah,
why
I agree
does
with that.
he think that?
They do.
And
they literally do. That's a great way of putting it. They do. They scream at you.
The important thing about it is that the author seems to have believed there was something fishy going on. He may not have actually known the truth about himself. And what's important is not that what we can't impose our beliefs and social mores on it, because what's important is what they believed about themselves. There were in the court, there were many people who were stepchildren or who were adopted or by other families because they were born out of wedlock. So there were changeling children. The Careys were there. They could link their ancestry possibly to Mary Boleyn, Anne Boleyn's sister, who had affairs with Henry VIII. So some of the Carey children were grandchildren possibly grandchildren of Henry VIII. So, and that's a historic fact. Oxford himself was a ward of the Queen. He was as a 12-year-old, his father died, and he became the Queen essentially became his de facto mother, because he was an orphan. So it's a complicated question, and there are many permutations of it, and we don't know everything we need to know to solve it. But it is interesting to explore, especially in interpreting the works. Now, the people who say this is a historical question are not tolerant of the theory and go with the standard historical story of Elizabeth being a virgin. And there is plenty of evidence for all of that too. So it's a complicated question. And
it definitely is. I absolutely agree. And I think because it's so complicated is one of the reasons why newcomers to the question are most curious about that aspect of it.
And there's also the insinuation in the movie Anonymous, where it is not really posited that the theory is true. It is suggested that it might be true. If you really
Correct.
watch the film, Robert Cecil kind of tells Oxford that there were rumors. He doesn't tell him. He doesn't know whether it's. He doesn't tell him whether it's true or not. He just kind of insinuates that it might have been the case. So,
well, and the thing is,
people
I
misinterpret
think
that
those of us who have
bit.
been involved with this issue for a great length of time, especially if our involvement predates that film, there are things about that film that I think are magnificent, and there are things about that film that I question tremendously. But it's a piece of art. It's a piece of performance.
Right. It's fiction.
It's a movie. Yeah, it's a movie. It's meant to entertain. And I think it does that quite well. I think the issue that we as Oxfordians have to address is the fact that newcomers to the topic are going to be instantly aware of the PT theory issue. And that's the questions they tend to first have. Hey, I've heard about this. I saw this movie.
It
what I want to know
intrigued me.
Yes, right. Is this true? Is this not true? Somebody give me an answer. And that's where I think a lot of people immediately go to when they come to this topic newly and in their first leg of their journey. And it's one of the reasons I think a lot of my listeners ask me about where I stand on that topic and want to know more about my positions on that topic. They want to know more about your positions on that topic. They want to know more about Roger Strittmatter's positions on that topic. They know the positions of people like Hank Whittemore and Catherine Chilton because they've been on this program and they've given their answers. They know Bonner's position. They want to know everyone's position on this topic so they can figure it out on their own what they believe or agree with or don't agree with. That's what I hear a lot of.
Yeah. It comes up a lot, and sometimes I have to say, okay, we've talked about this in ad nauseum. Let's go read what has gone before us. Because
do you find that sometimes you have to do that? Do you have to like send newcomers to the page and say, hey, go find earlier threads because this has been covered and covered and covered again.
Yes.
So just scroll and do your own
because
thread search.
We don't need to reinvent the wheel over and over again. And it's the longtime members of the page who still participate constantly, have been through that so much that it's kind of a little bit much to ask them to watch it happen again and again and again.
Sure.
And
that
there
makes total sense.
are extensive discussions on the page, but that's the thing about the problem with social media is it's so labor intensive to archive all that stuff. I archived one thread on North that happened this fall, and it had 600 comments, and I just copied it into a Word document and deleted all the pictures and stuff that come up when you copy something off of a website. And it took me the better part of a day to make that into a transcript, basically. And so it's almost impossible to archive this stuff. There's a great deal of information on the site. We have a lot of, you can add a PDF file as a post. And if you can go to the files on the page, we have archived a lot of things like book lists, reading lists, suggested points, some people post articles. So there is kind of a file archive that goes with the page.
That just
as well.
points to what a great resource and asset the page is to the Oxfordian position. and to the Shakespeare authorship question as a whole, because sometimes, as you've pointed out, there are people on the Shakespeare site who are not Oxfordian and who present other options, other optics, other things to look at, think about, consider, research, and you don't shut them down when they are there. You just ask them to A, obey the rules, and B, support their positions.
They don't always stay around for a long time, because sometimes they get, tired of us because they want to hear about their guy, not our guy. And
what does Earl Showerman has a saying that he says relatives of his have nicknamed him the Obnoxfordian.
Right.
Something to do with being obnoxious about being Oxfordian. Right. I think I maybe just butchered that, but he'll hear this and he'll send me an email. Yeah. I think it's Obnoxfordian though.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of being the Obnoxfordian in my family too.
I think my family would agree.
Yeah.
My father actually, I think, has come around to understanding that there is really a question. And he, for the first time the other day, posted that, yeah, it's a real question. It's complicated.
That's awesome. Look at you. You converted one of the most difficult converts in your whole life right there.
Yeah, my father's a chemist, so he's pretty skeptical about things sometimes.
That's fantastic. But yeah, so I get it. I understand that, there might be people who come in and go, Marlowe, and they just get bombarded.
They're like, no.
And they go, okay, never mind. I'm going to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
I could totally see that. Totally see that. But
we have a tendency to gang up on people like that sometimes.
But I do believe, based on the amount of years that I've been following the page and my own personal involvement in the page, in posting things or commenting on other people's posts, what I have always found is that there's respect is given if it is provided. And I think that's true about life, and I think it's true on the site. If somebody comes in honestly, let's say there's a listener listening right now who decides they want to go to the site and they want to ask about Marlowe, or they want to ask about North, or they want to ask about Neville, or some of the other candidates that have sort of swirled around the Oxfordian issue. They're not going to be fired upon. They're not going to be shut down. They're going to be informed. If they're honestly inquiring, they're going to receive wonderful answers and wonderful information.
Yeah, there are people like Jan Cole in England, who's a member of DVS, who is a historical whiz. She knows so much and has such good resources in the library that she's collected, and she lives in Castle Hedingham, which is the village near the De Vere family seat, Castle Hedingham. So we have, and Alexander Waugh. He doesn't have a lot of time to be on the page, but he will visit if on occasion. And Roger, who did his dissertation on the De Vere Bible that the Folger Library owns, back in the 70s. No, sorry, in the 90s.
He
may have started in the 70s.
Wait a minute. Yeah, wait.
But yeah.
He's going to listen. He's going to be so mad at you.
Got my
He's
timeline.
So mad at you.
Totally got my timeline off. Sorry.
He's been a wonderful guest of this program as well, a couple of different times.
Yeah. So there are a lot of people are there, and you can see people will. You mentioned portraiture. We talk about portraits a lot, which is really interesting. The visual evidence of what people looked like in the time. And Julie is a genealogist, and she's very good at providing what the family linkages are, which is really important. Jan Cole's really good at that too. So it's never a dull moment. I could say.
And I love the comments that happen when somebody finds a portrait or posts a portrait of someone and they say, "Hey, is this supposed to be this person?" Or this is indicated as being this person, but I believe it may actually be falsely identified and it might actually be a portrait of this person. And then the threads and the comments and the research that people will do immediately upon that and share with you. And when you go to the page and you see some of those, just be careful. I'm going to warn everybody right now. I'm going to warn you, fellow Quillers, once you go there, be careful. Your screen time is going to go up. Your hours of screen time are about to increase because you're going to rabbit hole some of these topics that you can find there on that page, and people will continue to add to, as you said. Like, I can't imagine 700 comments on a thread. That's just out of control.
Yeah, they get ripped. Our discussions are lengthy
that has to be rare.
And lengthy and in depth very often. But if somebody just wants to talk about
nerds,
if somebody wants to talk about something just lightheartedly or funny, that happens too.
It's true. It's not all of us Shakespeare nerds.
We like to
going
joke
on
around too.
No, it's true, and there are some fun things. I know the most recent post I contributed to the page was a quote. It was a meme. It was a quote on a meme, and it was basically, I was throwing some shade at Stratfordians because the quote was about not questioning and just taking stuff for face value. Every guest, every listener of this program knows our tagline is keep asking questions. And so we're all about standing against that kind of just blind acceptance of anything, it was fun to watch some of the comments that people threw out there, just for fun, which is why I kind of add that kind of content sometimes just to keep things light and funny.
I don't have to do it so much anymore, and recently there hasn't been that much kind of tabloid Shakespeare stuff. I'm sure it'll ramp up in 2023 in the 400th anniversary of the publication of the first folio. Mm-hmm. So there will probably be more of that kind of activity. But I just search Google for new stuff every 2 or 3 days to see if there's anything we've missed. And there are other pages that we're all members of that there's stuff that comes through that looks interesting that I'll add to the page. But since a lot of people are in more than one page, I don't like to duplicate too much. But
sure. So you might share something from, say, the DeVere Society Facebook page or somewhere else.
Yeah,
but
or the
that most
SOF
of the people,
page.
Sure. Most of the people are already going to see that content, though.
Yeah. But I realized that my emails from the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship were not showing up in my primary box in my Gmail. And so I did a crowd query to see what was going on with that. And it turned out there were 6 or 8 other people who were having the same problem. And I don't think it's an SOF problem. I think it's a Gmail problem. So, but, just little communications things like that, we can all kind of help each other iron out things like that. So It is a community. It's, it's a working community. And a couple of people didn't know that the SOF conference was going on, so they were able to tune in because I reminded them and said, "Oh, if you didn't get the email, here it is." And SOF, the Shakespeare at Oxford Fellowship, does post on our page and share information with us quite often that they post. including publications and stuff like that. So
Sure. And that's definitely true. But when you look at the forum aspect of it, one of the things that I love about the Shakespeare page is that it is this constantly active, engaging forum, whether it's you, as you say, doing Google searches every couple of days and throwing some relative content up there, or user generated content that is being put up there. The key to it is that everyone there knows there's an active audience paying attention. And so I think many of us, when we put a post up there, are posting to that audience. In fact, I know for me, because I know that you moderate the page, I go, okay, I don't ever want to put anything up there that Shelley is going to reject as being irrelevant or not pertinent or, whatever. Like, I'm like, okay, when I post it, I know in the back of my head that you're going to see it and determine whether it belongs there or not.
Yeah, well, I reject very little stuff. Mainly like to avoid repetition if two people accidentally post on the same thing on the same day because they're not paying attention to what they haven't scrolled down to see what other people have posted that day. And just things that are inappropriate. We don't really allow people to bring in their contemporary politics because there are people of all political stripes on the page, and we just want it to stay out of those conflicts. Not have those conflicts on this page. That makes
total sense.
You can go do that anywhere else on the internet.
Right.
We don't, this is a safe, a bit of a safe haven from that. We're, 15th, 16th, 17th century is fine, but we're not doing 21st century politics as much. We do talk about issues of censorship as they continue to manifest themselves in our lives and things like that. And like you said, the psychology of the authorship question and of doubters and orthodox scholars and so forth. But we try to stay away from political discussions as much as possible. Unless they are
I think
completely relevant to Shakespeare.
I think orthodoxy and doubters, I think on both sides of that issue, you're going to also find people on both sides of every other issue.
Right.
Within those groups. So, there's nothing about being an authorship skeptic that indicates whether you're conservative, liberal, or whatever else, because it has nothing to do with that. So I can understand why that's not important to the topic or the issue. Now, whether you
certain
believe
Stratfordians have tried to insinuate that Oxfordianism is it has an ideology behind it, but if you get to know a bunch of Oxfordians, that is becomes completely obviously untrue to you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have close Oxfordian colleagues that if I were to take a guess at their political leanings, some of them I think are probably on absolute opposite spectrums, but who come together, who I've seen come together at the same table or in the same conference room or whatever, and absolutely agree on this issue without ever having to talk about those issues. That's the point.
Right.
Certainly. No, I think that's wise, and I don't understand why anyone would go to a Shakespeare page and want to start, spouting modern politics. I could see where you might get into some comparisons maybe of the behavior of the people in the Elizabethan court and certain modern behaviors or
Or
ideologies.
Shakespeare's characters, certain
Sure.
villains I mean, that's kind of interesting to me, but if it's, right now politics, then you start getting into that. If the conversation stays on Shakespeare, that's fine. But I think we're here we're here to discuss issues about Shakespeare and the Oxfordian theory. So
years ago,
best,
I used to give Shakespearean presentations at high schools, and oftentimes a portion of the presentation would include Lord and Lady Macbeth. And I would talk about contemporary relevance. And without ever saying anyone's name, I would say to like a group of 300, 400 high school students in an auditorium. And I would say, is there any modern reference that you could possibly connect to Lord and Lady Macbeth? And almost always every group would shout out the Clintons. And I used to think, well, okay, there you go. I didn't say it. They said it, but it was just one of those types of political comparisons that could be made regardless of whether you support them or not support them. And they're out of power now anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But the point being is I could see where people could go into that kind of discussion because it points out how these works remain relevant today. Right. That's what I'm driving at.
Yeah. And that's always interesting. But if as long as you stick to the comparison and not go into other issues, which people just are tempted to go in off in all kinds of different directions on that stuff. So that's why we have moderators.
Right. So, okay. So there's another good point to point out. And part of the rules is you keep people honest when it comes to, okay, that's not what we're here for. We're here for this topic.
Yeah.
And
we're
please
kind of
stay
on topic is another important rule.
Ironically, though, since we've touched on this subject, Oxfordians get accused regularly of being snobs. It's snobbery. We're elitists who only believe that an aristocrat could have been responsible, and the poor boy from Stratford couldn't possibly have achieved what he's achieved. And I always take umbrage at that because that is so not it. We all look at Ben Franklin and we all recognize that Ben Franklin did what Ben Franklin was able to do as, one of 10 children struggling from a poor family to rise up and become the greatness that he was. It's not about diminishing that type of greatness. It's about pointing out that it didn't happen here.
Yeah, it's not that we don't think he could have. It's that the historical record and the evidence of the plays suggests that perhaps he didn't.
Right. And so in a lot of ways, I think when you mentioned earlier that Oxfordians have been accused of having some sort of political agenda, I think sometimes that's one of the things that they throw at us, right? Is, oh, you're all a bunch of elitists.
Well, the Shakespeare mythos ties right in with democratic ideals, so it's held very dear, and it is kind of a self-made man story, but it's also about access, and this author had access to things that the average common person in that time probably did not have access to. Books that were not translated or printed in English. You couldn't you couldn't browse the bookstalls. Their libraries were private. Libraries were private because books were extremely expensive and valuable. There were no public. There were
you
no
mean
public
Shakespeare of
libraries.
Stratford? Shakespeare of Stratford just couldn't go on Amazon and order the latest book about the Shakespeare
Yeah.
authorship question.
Yeah, I couldn't just Google Holinshed, so or Ovid.
Right? Yeah. Oh, dear Ovid, please send me this work in a language I can read. Thank you very much, William Shakespeare of Stratford.
Right. And just, so many other deep disciplines that the common person wouldn't really have much access, like falconry, for example.
When you so here's a question I have for you that's not actually related to the Facebook page, but maybe is in some way, and that is that you teach large number of students year in, year out, every year. How many students would you say go through your classrooms each year in a regular non-COVID corrupted year?
I have about 160 students a year because I teach.
How many of them are aware of the fact that you're an Oxfordian? Any? All of them?
I would say a small percentage of them, because I don't really, it's not really my job to talk about it.
Sure.
I do talk about it some, and like occasionally one person knows about it and will strike up a conversation. I've had students who find out that I know about it come ask me questions, and I'm contemplating starting a student study group, kind of a school of night, as you will.
Ooh, I like that. Oh, I really like that idea.
I'm not sure how many students will bite. I'm going to put a flyer on my office door and hope it doesn't get vandalized.
What does your husband think of that idea? What does Roger feel about that idea?
He thinks it's great.
He supports that idea? Okay,
yeah,
good,
he thinks
cool.
that's a good idea.
Cool.
I actually taught a one class in a junior or senior level Shakespeare class on the authorship question once. And the students were very receptive. Two or three students got up and left. And I heard that there was some sort of protest. And I went and asked my the head of literature, Ginny Fowler. I asked her what the controversy was about, and she said the English majors were offended at the students who were rude to me by getting up and leaving. And that was maybe 2 or 3 people out of 30 or 40.
Mm-hmm.
So I was pleasantly surprised that was the case.
So what the big to-do was, students who were rightfully offended by inappropriate and rude behavior.
Right. Weren't.
That's cool.
They weren't offended by my presentation of the authorship question, even though they had been visited by another visiting instructor the day before, who was a Stratfordian, and they were delighted to have varying points of view. So.
Now, do you ever have a student who just I can imagine that students Google their teachers and want to learn about their teachers. So you ever have students who Google you and find a presentation you've made at an SOF conference on YouTube, or find that you're the moderator of the Facebook page and then come to you and ask you about any of that kind of thing?
Not yet. Well, I did have one student who was a communications major, and which is, that department is also in our building. And her mother was on Shakespeare, and she was was training to be a broadcast journalist, and she's interested in the theory as well, and she decided to interview me for her practice interviews.
Oh, cool.
So that was fun.
I'll bet.
As far as I
is there video of that somewhere?
I don't think so. It was just for her broadcast journalism classes. So
okay,
but
yeah, because that's something that I think should like go up somewhere on YouTube or wherever. If she was doing
I think she's
a,
graduated, but it was a couple of years ago. But
it's sort of her reel. In the entertainment industry, you need to have a reel in order to get
that's
any
what
work.
she was. That's what she was.
And
doing.
so, yeah, she was. That was sort of her reel. I'll bet. I'd like to see that.
Probably. So,
well, tell me, as we start to wrap up on some time, one last thing I'd like to ask you about is, tell me about how you feel the Shakespeare site serves best as a resource to those who come upon it, and the level of importance that you believe it holds to the conversation as a whole.
I think it reaches a lot of people who are not necessarily reached by other media. There are a lot of people on there. It's also global. We have people who are in other European countries, a lot of people from England, people from Australia. I know a couple of people from China, all over the country, all different ages. So I think we reach people that like the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship is not reaching, and also give people a voice who wouldn't otherwise have a voice in the conversation, because it's kind of intimidating to try to imagine yourself presenting at a conference. In front of our conferences, you present around in front of at least 100 people, so that's a little bit daunting for some people.
It's true. I remember my first conference, I was so starstruck, I guess is what I would say, at the very first conference I went to, when I was meeting people like your husband Roger for the very first time, and knew these names, but suddenly was putting names to faces and actually getting to meet some of these prominent people whom I had read from or about years prior, and then I remember my first conference presentation and how nervous I was about that. And you suddenly, it starts to become like, oh yeah, this is the gang. And I've always want to point out to newcomers that you too can be a part of the gang. We're all part of the gang. Come be a part of the gang. Come be a fellow quiller. Come be a fellow member of SOF. Like, come be a part of the gang. It's not as intimidating as it feels or seems. It not in any way. It really isn't.
Yeah, and if somebody asks you a hard question, you just answer as best you can, or say, I don't know. Or
right.
We should look
There's
into
nothing
that.
wrong with saying,
There's
don't know.
There's nothing wrong with not knowing.
Sure.
So,
I'm so glad. I'm thank you for agreeing to be the guest for this episode and for explaining some details about the site. I believe that it's a valuable resource, and one of the things that I wanted to do was encourage my listeners to go find it. And I think you've done a wonderful job of explaining its history, why it's there, what it serves, what the rules are, why there have to be rules. But nonetheless, how open that forum truly is for adult, rational discussion on such a myriad of topics, too, on a regular basis. And I hope that my listeners will go and find it on Facebook if they're Facebook users, and become contributors to the discussion as well.
Shakespeare has a little bit of a problem with Facebook's new rules that say that new members cannot post until they've been a member of the group for a month. In a way, that's kind of a good thing because people should get to know the lay of the land before they start participating. But generally, we Julie and I make exceptions to that. You just message us that you have something you'd like to post if you're still kind of in the 1 month probation period. So, but you're free.
That's good to know.
You're free to comment on anybody else's post, but there is a new structure. There are new rules on Facebook about posting in groups, so we can disable that. But very often people come in and kind of fire shots across the bow. It's kind of good to avoid that sometimes.
Now, what's the easiest way to find it? If I go into Facebook and I do a search, it's probably easiest if I just type Shakespeare. That's Vere.
Right.
Shakespeare.
Yeah, there are 2 pages that might come up. One is kind of one is a page and the other one is a group. You want the group. And you can tell, and we have 1,300 some members. So it's the group with a lot of people in it.
Right. So we hope to increase that number with this episode. So all of you who are out there listening, if you're looking for more information, you want to be part of the discussion, you want to just watch the conversation unfold on the page, the SOF website, and I'll mention it here because I think everybody who's listening knows where it is, but ShakespeareOxfordFellowship.org, ShakespeareOxfordFellowship.org. The SOF website is a great resource, but it's not happening in real time, and it's not getting comments from people regularly on different topics as those topics are being addressed. And that's the wonderful thing about going to the Shakespeare Facebook page is you get to be a part of this ongoing conversation. And as any Oxfordian will tell you, as any authorship doubter will tell you, once you get 2 of us in the same room together, this is what happens. A whole podcast happens, in fact. There you go.
Yeah. So my phone is running out of battery. So
Groovy. I think we're running out of episode. Thank you, Shelley, so much for joining us and for giving us your time and explaining to us. We like to remind the listeners to become a member of the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship. You can find membership information on their website. Go to the Facebook page, Shakespeare by another name. I think you'll enjoy it. Thank you for listening. We appreciate you choosing us when there are so many other options out there. And we love our loyal fellow Quillers. And that's why every episode we end by saying, keep asking questions.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, please leave a rating and review in your podcast player. For even more, visit our website, don'tquillthepodcast.com. There you can find official merchandise in our shop, as well as a link to our Patreon. This show is made possible by people like you. We hope you'll consider showing your support by becoming a monthly patron, where you'll receive bonus material and tons of exclusive perks. You can also join in the conversation on our Discord and by following us at Don't Quill the Pod on all social media. All of this can be found at don'tquillthepodcast.com, don'tquillthepodcast.com.
It's Dragon Wagon.